All right. Let's see. I just want to kind of cover some things we didn't get to cover. And just kind of do actually some best way to um, learn is by sort of copying others, master copy, if you will. So I'm going to give my paper a little bit, or at least my background, a little bit of color. I like to use this hue saturation or Control U, and actually change my background color to something that's I don't know, just a little bit more fun than just white, pure white background. Probably not the best. Whoops, let me undo my thing here. I'll try it again. Um, you could do this in a myriad of ways. And oh wait, why is it not something not right here? Let's try that one more time. Just gonna do it. So not going to do it. Let's try this. Okay, that worked. You just color a different color, and now you can move this slider around. And I like to pick something in the sort of medium value, which just means that I want it to be somewhere in that middle area of my color wheel, sort of not more neutral, not too bright, not too light. And in this case, I'm going to do a little bit of warmer tones. And then I'm going to just grab some textures off the internet. I like coffee stained paper textures. Those are always kind of fun to play around with. So let me just grab that and do another screen here. Let's see here, coffee stained textures. Just move that. Something like this can work. So I'll just take copy. If you just search coffee stained paper, sometimes I like using rust, brush metal, anything you can kind of think of. You want it to be a little bit not too busy, too much. You can definitely do something where it's just so overpowering, but I think this can actually work. So let me go back into Photoshop. I want to bring back my pure ref here. Right. And I'm going to paste in, copy paste, right? Copied it from the website, totally plagiarized, right? And I'm going to expand it here, kind of get a thing here, kind of just rotate it, maybe um, get it as big as I can. I don't care about like resolution and all that. It's just a background noise. You can also in your layers palette. And by the way, if you're wondering, why isn't this thing coming forward? It's really frustrating. In your layers palette, if you want to have yours look like mine, you can make it the sort of have a bigger preview, especially if you're on a smaller screen like a laptop. This can be really beneficial. So you click on the little tab here and panel options, and you can actually change the size of the previews for each layer. Usually I'll stick to this one. I think this is a perfect size for my screen. And you want to set it to layer bounds, not entire document. And you hit OK. And you'll have probably a bigger one. By default, it's usually, I think, on the smallest one. It's usually, I think on this one, it's just a little bit small for my taste. If you have hundreds of layers, 50 plus layers, probably keep it on the small is maybe a little bit better. But I find just for teaching and all that, the bigger the better. So I'll go ahead and keep it large so you can see. And so now I can scroll through different layer modes on my document here, right? And you can kind of see what each one sort of has an effect on that texture. Now we have a colored background, and the texture is a kind of colored, kind of like this multiply, kind of makes it a little bit darker. I can also lower the opacity, right? Lower that opacity just a little bit. I also like to, I'll make a new layer. So I have my background layer, my texture, and on the new layer, I'm going to fill that layer. So if I can hit Control Alt, and I'm going to fill that layer with a texture or a pattern. So I have a bunch of ones that I have already loaded in. You can use any one of these. You can kind of play around with some of the default ones that are there. I have this really grid pattern that I really like. It's almost similar to like graph paper. So I'm going to fill it there. And now we have this texture. And now I can also lower the opacity of that layer, right? So it's kind of diminished. You know, if you really want to get fancy with it, you can kind of create differences so it's not even all around. And the way I like to do that is by using a layer mask, right? So to click that layer and just click this little icon at the bottom of your layers palette, right? And at the bottom of the layers palette is all these little options you can do. You can throw away the layer, duplicate the layer, create a group of the layer, create an adjustment layer, create an effects to that layer. And what we're using is the layer mask. As the name implies, this creates a mask where you can actually hide or hide pixels of that layer. You know, whichever way you want to do it. For this case, I'm just going to do something really quick and simple. I'm just going to use a filter because I want to be really fast with this. I don't want to spend a lot of time, but pixels, let's see, render clouds or difference clouds. And what this creates is like a random soft sort of cloud pattern. Now it's going to break up you know, that pattern just a little bit. You could do this by hand, by the way. Like let's say instead of using this difference cloud pattern, I'm just going to undo it. And I can just paint into that layer mask with a soft airbrush, right? And this allows me, if I just paint with a black, right now my active color is white, but if I switch it to black, I can actively hide pixels from that layer to show, and it creates this nice little, you know, it's not even all over. And now this is my background. This is my special paper I'm going to draw on. And I just like that, you know, recently it's just what I like. And you can do all kinds of things. You can come in here, change the color of your original texture if you want, you know, kind of get really fancy with it. You can change the contrast of it by any, you know, whatever your heart's content. You can literally spend hours just noodling, just or fiddling around with these things to get what you want. You know, I can kind of create a really, but for me, it's really just a background. It's a way to kind of avoid a white piece of paper. Think of like the background of Leonardo da Vinci's sketchbook. I kind of like that effect, and the coffee stain paper is one of my favorites. All right, so you can kind of do that, you know, kind of funky with it. You can even change the background color if it really suits you, and so forth. Now we're all set to go. I'm going to move my layers palette back to where it should be, and I'm going to now create a new layer on top of everything, and I'm going to switch back to my favorite brush here. Where you at? This is an elliptical sort of hard round brush. I'm gonna actually move this around a little bit. Lately, I've been having like issues with real estate here. It's kind of just bothering me. I'm tempted to just make this to just because I think pure ref is kind of finicky. But anyway, let's take this. Get a nice size, and I think this will be just about perfect size to draw. And now I'm going to pick holding an option or alt. If you're on a Mac, it's option, right? On a PC, it's alt. And I can color pick the colors here. This is background colors. And I kind of want to pick something that's going to be a little bit darker. So let me make my brush bigger, kind of like that. So that's a little bit darker. I want to give it a little bit more saturation. Let me see. I'm going to use this one instead. This colorway, I think it's a little bit better. I'm going to dock this one over here, but kind of hide it because I actually don't need the color wheel. Let's see. Let's move this up. Is there any way color wheel? No. HSB sliders. Okay, there you go. That's better. I like having the sliders from, those I can always like just do that. These are great, but they're a little bit abrupt for my taste. But here I like to have this sort of representation, what sort of looks cool. And let's go a little bit darker. I think that will work great. All right. What's going on here? Something's not right. Space. Yes, 1 second. Okay, we're back in business. Let's take a look at some of these, right? We have sort of a cascade of the way the hand is sort of set up here. Right, here's our thumb. And this is something that's just kind of fun to play with, is how the knuckles of the hand sort of create this this sort of circular rhythm with the everything is sort of a relative proportion. You can't just sort of eyeball it and expect it to where you sort of have to actually go in and making sure that this knuckle, right, the first knuckle sort of more or less, sort of has this kind of relationship to it. And the same thing goes for the second knuckle. So maybe we kind of expand this out a little bit. Yeah, this is our first knuckle here. And this one's like this long. Right. So if this one's here, this is our sort of this is our first and our second. So that has to more or less line up. That's kind of fun to kind of play with these kind of proportions, if I feel like maybe that now that this distance is a little too short, I kind of take my lasso tool, right? It's this little tool here. I have it set to the A key. By default, it's usually the L key, but I can select those pixels and just sort of move it into where I think it would be the right length, and I can just cover my seams there. And now the rest of the fingers, I mean, as long as I sort of more or less keep the same proportion, I think I'm okay. It's not going to be the end of the world, or you could apply the same sort of gesture as well. If you actually would go this way, right? This one sort of come out this way. Oops. And maybe the ring finger kind of comes down there, and so forth. I'm probably not gonna do the pinky just because you'd probably be tucked away at that point, just in general. Then you kind of count for the. I like to use the nail to sort of create a sense of direction for that. Let's fix some of this. Let's get a nice. And you cannot see as soon as I change this or change that, I gotta, adjust this. It's like they have that relationship, at least optically, so it gets a little tricky sometimes. So, and that's, yeah, thinking about that, those relationships. All right. Oh, I see. Also, so this first knuckle would line up with that knuckle. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I was kind of reading his diagram there, and it still kind of does line up there. So that's cool. So this would be here. Let's see that one first. Okay, so this would be there. So we have to, all we have to do is basically essentially shorten this just a little bit. I knew something was off. I was like, wait a minute. And that's okay. There you go. I think now we're in good standing here. As far as, so this knuckle lines up with that. So that's a good, and then these knuckles sort of line up with this, that's a hidden knuckle in the thumb. Really interesting, right? And doing these master copies, I don't like to necessarily just do a one-to-one copy. You definitely can, but I find it's more valuable just to take one thing from it, one part of the thing, and just try to understand it or make sense of it. It's much faster, and you don't have to sit there worrying about how perfect you are to the original. I don't. I just find that's a waste of my precious time. I sort of want to eventually draw my own thing. I don't want to have to be drawing others. We look at it from a different viewpoint, right? Oops, sorry about that. I want to make sure I'm drawing, roughly, somewhere around this size, so just a nice reminder when you're drawing, I don't want to draw too big and I don't want to draw too small. I guess to each his own, but I find, working, let's say our first knuckle is here, our second, third's gonna be around here, and our last one. Here's the pit of the where the thumb, and this will be sort of, there we go. And I'm sort of making this up as I go, but I want to utilize the same pattern, right? As the same sort of formula as when I'm constructing things. I always like to practice that. That way I get good at inventing things rather than just copying. Like, if you practice copying, you're essentially just becoming a better copier, and then there's nothing wrong with that either. I'm not saying that's totally bad, but I find I'm better suited where I feel more proud of things when I'm actively, shooting from the hip of my hip being maybe my imagination or my thoughts. I find it's a little bit more fun and a little bit more free, but you need to build up sort of a visual library with a lot of sketches and drawings. Just for the sake of this, let's move the thumb out. And so now our thumb, we're going to be seeing the top of the thumb in this case. So I want to make sure I get the actual forms right. If I start doing this, I feel like now we're drawing the underside. So I want to make sure we get this right. So maybe we're gonna draw. Is it this way? Let's try. Yeah, I think that could work. Yeah. Right. And sometimes it's just good to kind of see where things land, where they're sort of projected to land. So I'll just create little tick marks. Right. There's nothing wrong with that. When you're trying to sketch out ideas, you just create little anchor points. I just like to reinforce that. See this little thing here. Let's kind of beef this up. Right. E for eraser, B for brush. I hit Control Z or Command Z if you're on a Mac to undo. I can also go back in history, forwards and backwards. So if I want to go back to when I, first did the textures I could. And now I want to make sure all my forms go in this direction. So I'm going, this thing is going away from me. I'm picturing it that way, right? So I want to draw all my, little soda can cylinders. I want to sort of draw them in that way, sort of. Now it's kind of looking a little too steep, so maybe it won't be as much. But let's draw it a little bit more this way. Right, I'm always sort of testing what would be a better design, for this. And sometimes you just gotta let it go, run with it, see what sticks. Be willing to make some mistakes, improv a little bit with it. I think that works, right? This is just most important, the relationship between if this is our first this is our first knuckle, right? Knuckle 1, knuckle 2, K2, so K2, right? And then that should line up with more or less some kind of, the whole hand is still going to have this rhythm to it. And I can kind of tweak this a bit. I can kind of make this a little bit more. Imagine this was like Andre the Giant's hand, right? Maybe this would be a little bit more this way, or this is more like a real chubby hand, maybe it would be a little bit less that way. So you can kind of play with these formulas. Just for the sake of the sketch, I'm gonna move it over and just shrink it down a tiny bit. If you want to control in Photoshop, you take your lasso tool and you select the pixels you want on that layer. I can move it around, whatever I can, at that point, but I can also transform it. So I just go to edit, transform, and hit free transform, which isn't, it's here, free transform, which is Control T. You see in that menu, Control T. So I hit Control T, and using these handles, I can kind of, shrink it down, and it will distort. But if I hold on Shift, it locks it, so it shrinks it proportionally. And so there, I hit Enter, and even with that, I can rotate it and all that. So it's a really handy way to. So let's get our thumb. Use your own hand as a reference. Kind of double check, and I kind of like where this is going. Like, this is an interesting little sketch. But I kind of want to make it beef it up a little bit, kind of give it a little bit more of a chubby, not chubby, but like really thick. So I'm trying to draw that all. That was one of my goals, with this stuff. I was like, I want to draw it's kind of monster hands, And you can, at this point, now that I've established that, once I sort of know where this thing is going to end up, maybe I could even, you could even change it up. You could say this middle finger now is going to, bend inward or something, and this one's going to follow suit. And of course, this one you could sort of do that if you want to. But these relationships, at least how the knuckles line up, should have some kind of corresponding relationship. So and if they don't, that's okay too. Sometimes as you can kind of see, I've sort of winged it a little bit. I should have probably kept it all wide open there, but it's a little bit better. Yeah, I try to challenge like what I've drawn this way many times, but I always like to try and see if I can kind of, can I do it a different way? I'm always trying to get that, but I always end up with this formula. There's just some things that just look good no matter, it's hard to deny no matter which way you go with that. But anyway, this is kind of a fun relationship. But look at it now, I kind of want to just even out some of this, maybe lessen that bend. you kind of see at this point. I think it's um, uh, sometimes you just, taking your design and be willing to sort of, um, you know, redrawing it, sometimes, or just give it another pass, just see what happens. You just never know. I think that's that possibility is can be really exciting, or it can be really daunting. So, you can overcook a design, or you can also undercook it. And that's always, you can always go back and forth. There's always sort of the possibility that you can salvage it, sort of the rebound game, you know. I think this is probably a lot more severe, and what happens is this needs to come in more. This is, yeah, I think that's a little bit better. And then you just bump up. This is your ulna. This is the ridge that goes all the way to your elbow. This is your ulna, and then this is your radius. Doesn't really pop out much, but then this would be a little bit more severe, sort of. I would draw these in just as like indications, but in reality, this, if I was to render this out, all of these probably, would be just a vein, pattern or something. If anything, might kind of push that overlap. Just it's like this weird zombie hand. All right. Let's see. Let's pick another one that we can kind of dissect a little bit. We're doing sort of the top of the hand. I think I want to see what we can focus in on that. The fist is actually a good one here. All right. So I want to avoid just drawing the fist as, a box. I think I've seen this a lot. I used to do this too, but just like whatever box thing, when you're in a pinch, I guess it's fine. But what I like to think about is that knuckle line. Sort of does, let's make this more clear. Sort of does that. Right, and everything sort of kind of crunches in. Like this is your pinky, when you're actually really making a fist, your pinky finger is actually being tucked in to the little pads of your hand. And then if you look at your thumb is actually going to create a little overlap over that thumb. And there are many different types of fist. Like the fist he has here, I would say that's not really a punching fist. That's more like just hold a loose fist. Like a real punching fist, like you're really going to punch someone and make a fist. I would argue that thumb is going to, really pinch in this, because your actual, the part that if you look at martial arts, or even like boxing, you want to try to punch with this surface area here, which just leaves you about like what, a 2-inch maybe, and 2-inch square, roughly, or an inch and a half square, right? So if you punch with these, that you're going to break your hand. These are, this is not backed by anything, but here this is in line with the rest of your arm. The actual, if you're punching in a proper angle and all that. So I like to utilize that knowledge and take it further. But looking at Burne Hogarth's fist, which I like too, it's very dynamic. It's really cool, and he's got that nice like cascade or sort of rhythms to. I just don't agree with that fist as being anything that's it just seems a bit wonky, in my opinion, for an actual fist. It looks beautiful though, don't get me wrong. And then maybe the thumb comes down here. But this one just doesn't make any sense because this finger's easily, maybe if this was like holding, like I could see this being holding like something like a thin, maybe like a baton or something, or a very small short sword. Maybe the hilt would be up here. But I just don't see this as being sort of like the traditional, like, you know, fist fist to the face fist, right? Is that such a thing? You know what I mean? Right. So, uh, but pretty cool. Nonetheless, I still like the form language he's used that he's selling here, and so it's just really nice. And there you have it, right? But this is just beautiful. This kind of rhythm to these things, right? Really, really nice. Um, so I want to, you know, constantly try to find ways to create or push those rhythms with my design. So I encourage you guys when you're looking at these reference, you know, especially by these other artists, you know, take advantage of the gems they're giving you and put it into your work. They're really just they're sharing their life's work with you, essentially providing formulas for you to use. So at least the way I see it, you know, you don't have to read anything. You can just look at it. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. Look at that. And right away, you already got like a, you know, a thing you can add. So something here, I might try to play with this, you know, this kind of that here, get these to really line up, get these knuckles to really line up and so forth. And it's beautiful when you can do it and you can make it look like it's on purpose, and it's also um um you know, look like it's done on purpose, but also look like, hey, it makes sense to do that. You know, it's not just purely for aesthetic, but there's functionality in that. So, you know, function must follow form, right? So hopefully that you guys got to see a little bit using some of these materials, and you can do this for with any, not just hands, but you know, the feet as well. Really good stuff. His feet ones are great. I'll probably um cover that next, right? So that's gonna be it for this one. All right.